What's up, everybody, and welcome to the SaveState, a channel about all the things you love in nerd culture. My name is Landon Barden. I've got Ryan Royal here. And as of late, I've had this conversation a handful of times in my life as reading comics and graphic novels. And to an extent, some people like to, some people like to belittle it, some people don't want to belittle it, but just don't view it within this category. The question is, are comic books literature? And that's a really, really hard question to answer, and it requires semantics, it requires defining what literature is. How do you kind of view this? How do you initially answer this question?
Flat answer, straight up. If we look at the definition of literature, if we look at what is defined as literature, even then it gets hard because people can fall on either side. My initial reaction
There's many
is...
different definitions.
My initial reaction is yes. It is a continued narrative told in a form that, instead of using written expose for the sky was blue and the grass was green type of description, very, how Tolkien describes every blade of grass in the ground as they're walking to Moria. It tells that through art as opposed to written word.
But see, that's the other thing too, where you're... Actually, let me step away from that first and give my initial... Yes, I certainly, absolutely, 100% view comic books as literature. And I think if you feel this way, you're going to find a lot of sympathy here in this video. If you don't feel this way, I hope that this video will challenge your viewpoint a little bit.
Maybe give you a different way to think about it.
Make you think about it differently. And that's really all I'm wanting to get out of this. This is slightly subjective. This is an open-ended conversation. It's a conversation that's not going to be solidified at all.
If you don't think comic books are literature, your opinions are bad and you should feel bad.
That's not necessarily what I want to put here, but I just want to challenge you. So, now, back to what you just said there. The way that... This is the problem. I've had this argument with my fiance, who's... she's very good at writing. She likes to read books a lot, and she is on the opposite side of this opinion. Now... Not all graphic novels rely so heavily upon the picture to describe the scene.
No, not at all.
So many times, graphic novels will be closer to a traditional classic literature novel in terms of describing the scene. Like, you might get the picture of it, but they still might describe the scent. They might describe what the sky was like, or what the environment was like, what the sounds are like. And a lot of times there's certain graphic novels too. I think there's even a Daredevil book out there that many of the pages are just black. And it's just written word on there to emphasize to you what maybe he might see or how he might feel or something like that.
That's a brilliant approach in order to get you inside the mind of the character.
It's stuff like that that challenges the medium. And so if you look through history and you look at graphic... Here's the thing, too. I'm not going to argue here that all comic books and graphic novels that have been created garner the same respect and should be thought of in the same way that maybe like The Great Gatsby or Hamlet, should be viewed at.
It'd be like going to, the Quickie Mart and the spinny rack that has all of the tropey, gross romance novels and saying that is literature.
Yeah, which, by a definition, it absolutely is. But should it be? This is the overall question, and the argument that I want to provide here for you guys is that comic books and graphic novels should garner the same amount of respect as The Great Gatsby, and should be viewed at and thought of and compared to and discussed using the same language as these classic literature.
Can we take a story written by Frank Miller, or Jeff Loeb, or any of these other great writers and look at
what they've done?
Yeah, look at the character development. Look at the twists and the plot and the exposition and the rising action, and look at something like Gatsby or
some other classic
To Kill a Mockingbird or anything like that, and compare those story elements together. Just one has pictures and
it's just it's like a separate subcategory upon literature. You've got literature, and then you've got graphic novels, and you've got classic literature and contemporary literature and like maybe poetry and whatever. Like, it just starts to trickle out. And so how that is all compared. Now, if you look at the history of graphic novels and comic books, it wasn't until about the 70s things really started to mature. People started to view comic books as not just for children.
Right.
And then in the 80s, even DC went as far enough to have a snipe on all of their books that says DC is not just for kids. And that was their whole campaign, and they push it out to be like, this is serious business. We're really putting our hearts on the page and doing something different. And that's when you start to see the likes of Frank Miller, where if you look at The Dark Knight Returns and some of his other books, that they are doing things with this medium that has never been done before, and using the visuals to emphasize the words that are on the page, and the words on the page are just as strong as the visuals. Like anytime, say in a Frank Miller book, you saw Two-Face, he would show a full panel picture of Two-Face, and he would split it down the middle. It's still the full picture, but he would start to split it down the middle to re-emphasize to you and make you think, like, put this, using metaphor visually in the same way that maybe classic literature would use metaphor, narratively, to say, this man is split down the middle.
Visual metaphors are really, really highly present in graphic novels, or even just getting, when you read a book that is just words, like you read Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, and Tolkien is very good about describing and portraying everything that's going on around it. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. But back to Frank Miller, like the scenes where in A Dark Knight Returns, where we're seeing all of the newscasts talking about the mutants, talking about all the crime, talking about the return of Batman, and it's this very chaotic page with TV screens next to each other and all the words are kind of blurring together. It's really hard kind of to follow, but visually gives the impression of this news chaos that's happening, that if were to be just read in sentence or paragraph form, wouldn't encapsulate what he was trying to describe. I don't think it would.
But I would say here's the thing. I'm not sitting here to try to argue that graphic novels and comic books are better than traditional.
No, that's not what I'm saying
by any means. And I think a lot of people, especially like say when I've had this conversation with other people, they view it as graphic novels and comic books can't be considered literature because they rely upon imagery. And I'm like, I just want to challenge you to think that this is a medium that is changing and is expanding, and it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's to say that you can view them using the same language, and you can compare them using the same language.
And
they can be taught in college. We are seeing now in many universities where there are classes that are based upon comic books and graphic novels are being taught in literature classes. They're being taught, compared to these other things.
Well, they're doing things.
That is a glorious thing.
Yeah, they're doing things differently. Like I love a good sci-fi novel. I'm really partial, and a lot of people don't like Orson Scott Card Super a lot because they're just things with him. But I think his sci-fi novels of the Ender's Game and the Ender's Shadow stuff is great. And I love reading that, and I love visualizing and seeing in my mind, taking my imagination somewhere that it's never been to visualize what the buggers look like and what the ships look like and what the battle room looks like and everything like that. I wouldn't want to read a comic or a graphic novel of that because I've got that picture in my mind. But on the different side of things, reading a graphic novel of Superman or of Batman or of the Avengers or things like that, I get the artist rendition of that, and it's cool because my imagination can watch that play out. It's not that one is better than the other. It's not that Frank Miller is better than Tolkien. It's different, and they provide a different artistic experience for the reader, for the consumer.
But I think the important thing here is to look at, so you take, we're talking so much about Miller just because, I mean, he's in current history again right now. He's very popular, and so it's an easy comparison. But so I think, if you look at what Frank Miller is, he's an author, he is a writer, and I think if you look at him and you were to compare him to, say, Tolkien, they're one and the same in terms of what they do. They just do it in a different manner. They work, maybe he'll work with an artist, and maybe he'll be the artist himself, or he'll express himself through words and through visuals, and it's expanding what your viewpoint is upon what literature.
Well, let's talk about the artist thing then, because we've got, let's see, the key artist right now for DC really, and has been for a while, is Jim Lee. Can't argue against how amazingly well drawn Jim Lee comics are, and I've read a lot of interviews with him and heard him talk about his process and everything approaching when he gets the story. And other guys like Greg Capullo is doing a really great job with the New 52 Batman. His synergy with Scott Snyder writing that book is fantastic. They work together to create.
They marry those images and those words together in a way that you can't with, it requires a different method through classic.
Well, you take a look at Hush. The Batman book is one of the best written graphic novel stories. I mean, it was released episodically, but now you can buy it as a collection graphic novel. Jim Lee's art in there, just like you were talking about with the art for like Two-Face and how they metaphorically present things. Jim Lee's art is so tailored to telling the story just as much as the words that it's a visual literature.
Sure. Now, I think one other thing that we need to do through this video is to start to talk about what comics are and what graphic novels are and maybe the comparison between them, because I've had a lot of, there's probably going to be, if you're having this discussion, this argument with somebody else, I've had it plenty of times where somebody is like, well, Garfield's not, literature, like how can you, and I'm like, I think there needs to be an understanding that there is a little bit of a difference between a comic strip, which you would get in your funnies in the newspaper.
Right.
That's how comics started. Yes, Batman started in the funnies. He started in these little comic strips and stuff. I think the important thing is to emphasize to people that the medium has evolved, the medium has changed, and especially through the 70s, and really it got to a boiling point in the 80s, that things are a little different, and that graphic novels can be both a combination of comic books, of a series, so maybe it's a 10 issue and they compile them together and that's the same author.
An overarching story that comes together.
You put it together and you get into a book. Right. And then you've got other situations like The Watchmen, where that is written as a novel and it's introduced just as a book, and it's put out there in the bookshelves.
Yeah, well, as a musician, we can kind of take this argument over to that side as well, because we look at the evolution of music back from all the way to, monks singing in monasteries to what we have today, which sometimes we'd argue whether or not it's music or not, but like the argument of electronic music versus live music. Sure. I mean, on my way here, I was listening to Anna Monoguchi, and they rig an NES, and they play along with these tracks that they compose on the NES. Yeah. Or we've got BT, who's one of the foremost electronic music composers, who just recently took all the electronic music he did and rewrote it in order to play it with an orchestra. If we try to
he's a great example of expanding the medium, and changing things.
That's what I'm trying to get. The evolution of the medium of music, whether it's Anna Monoguchi, whether it's BT, they're creating and evolving music in a different way that doesn't subvert or say that Bach and Beethoven and Miles Davis aren't worth anything,
influential,
but is a continuation of that. It's the same thing happened when jazz came out. When jazz became a big thing, a lot of people were against that because it was an evolution of the medium of music. Comic books, graphic novels as literature is an evolution of the medium in a way that is combining visual art with storytelling and putting it in a way that nobody else is able to do in a different format.
And I think the important thing here, again, we're going to probably start wrapping this up pretty soon, but it's a thing where I don't, we certainly view graphic novels and comic books as literature.
Right.
Whether or not that's the important thing, I don't think it is. I think the most important thing here is to challenge the people that don't maybe feel this way and make them think about it in a higher level. And not everybody that says graphic novels and comic books are not literature are not trying to belittle it, but a handful of people are. And I think you need to challenge them and make them think and look at graphic novels on a little bit of a pedestal in comparison to other traditional literature, and teach it in the same way through colleges. There's, like I said, again, there's plenty of universities that are now teaching comic books, that are now teaching graphic novels and comparing it, and I think that's important, and especially for new authors and for people that are coming in to want to write books, want to write stories, want to write graphic novels, and to look at them and think about them and challenge them. And that's the only reason why we ever even got the 80s wonderful graphic novels that we did, was that these people, they challenged the medium and they evolved it and did something new.
Or even as a teacher, I mean, that you're talking about the production side of things. As a consumer side, if a kid might get into classic literature because they read a really great story in a comic book, do it. Yeah. Give the kid a Batman book, give the kid a Superman book, and then if it draws him into reading H.G. Wells or any of those other classic sci-fi writers, excellent.
Because the stories, the other point of this, as we're wrapping up here, is that comic books and graphic novels aren't always just about, let's get two real strong people and punch them. If you look at stuff like Why the Last Man, those are really interesting, powerful stories that have nothing to do with
Neil Gaiman's Sandman.
I mean, these are great stories that use political culture. They use really important stuff that's happening.
Social commentary on current events. The Watchmen was a total massive social commentary on the Cold War and everything.
Yeah. So these are mediums that tell powerful stories in a unique way, and I absolutely think that they should and deserve the respect that they have and that we have for them. And I want other people to have that. So with that in mind, let us know in the comments below, have we swayed your opinion at all? Have we challenged you to think about this in a different way? And then do you now at this point view comic books as literature? Is that an irrelevant argument? And do they have your respect? So, as always, if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and a subscribe and tell your friends about it. You can find out more from us. We're on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. And thanks, Ryan, for having this conversation.
Thanks,
with me.
Landon.
This is a
Good talk.
really good conversation. I like having this. So we'll see you guys next time.